ex-husband gave me his failing company in the divorce. He didn't know what I could do. The courtroom lights buzzed faintly overhead, casting a sterile glow on the polished mahogany table where my life was being dissected and redistributed like pieces of a broken puzzle. I sat there in silence, my hands folded tightly in my lap to hide their trembling. Across from me, James leaned back in his chair with an air of casual indifference, his tailored suit crisp and unyielding, just like the man inside it. His lawyer droned on about assets and liabilities, but all I could focus on was the smirk playing at the corner of his mouth when they mentioned the company, his company. James had built that business from the ground up, or so he liked to tell everyone who would listen. It started as a small startup in our garage during those early years of marriage, fueled by late-night brainstorming sessions over instant coffee and dreams too big for either of us to fully grasp. Back then we were partners, not just in love, but in ambition. We stayed up until dawn hashing out ideas, laughing through failures, celebrating tiny victories like they were Olympic gold medals. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. The partnership dissolved into resentment, the laughter faded into silence, and the shared dream became solely his. By the time we reached this moment, the final severance of ties, I no longer recognized the man sitting across from me. This wasn't the James the first fell in love with, this was someone else entirely. Someone colder, more calculating. And now, he was offering me what he deemed worthless, Lumina Tech Solutions. A failing tech company drowning in debt, hemorrhaging clients, and barely clinging to relevance in an industry that moved faster than anyone could keep up. "Take it," he said after the judge finalized the settlement, his voice dripping with condescension. "You always wanted to prove you could run things better than me anyway. Let's see how far your grand ideas get you." I bit my tongue, swallowing the retort that threatened to spill out. Instead, I nodded curtly, clutching the folder containing the transfer documents like it was a lifeline. As I walked out of the courthouse, the weight of those papers pressing against my chest felt heavier than any burden I'd ever carried before. Yet beneath the anger, beneath the hurt, there was something else stirring, a flicker of defiance. Maybe even hope. The first day I stepped into the office of Lumina Tech Solutions, I thought I might throw up. The building itself was a relic of ambition gone sour, its once gleaming glass facade now streaked with grime and neglect. Inside, the atmosphere was equally dismal. Fluorescent lights buzzed incessantly above rows of cubicles, many of which sat empty. Employees shuffled around like ghosts, their shoulders slumped under the weight of uncertainty. Morale was non-existent, and it didn't take long for me to realize why. In the conference room on my first morning, I called a meeting with the remaining staff. There weren't many of them, just 12 people crammed around a scarred wooden table that smelled faintly of stale coffee and despair. Their eyes darted between each other, wary and guarded, as if bracing themselves for yet another round of bad news. When I introduced myself as the new owner, the collective intake of breath was almost audible. "I know morale is low," I began, my voice steady despite the nerves gnawing at my insides. "And I don't blame any of you for feeling that way. This company has been through hell, and frankly, I'm not sure what shape we're really in. But here's the thing, I believe in second chances. For this company, for all of you, and yes, for myself." A few heads nodded hesitantly, but most remained skeptical. I couldn't blame them. After all, they'd watched James bleed the company dry, prioritizing flashy projects over sustainable growth, chasing trends without substance. When those ventures inevitably failed, he blamed everyone but himself, firing employees left and right until only a skeleton crew remained. By the time I arrived, Lumina Tech Solutions wasn't just failing, it was dying. But amidst the chaos, I saw potential. Beneath layers of mismanagement and poor decisions, there was still a foundation worth salvaging. The team, though battered, possessed talent and expertise. Some of them had been with the company since its inception, weathering storms far worse than anything James could conjure. They knew the industry inside and out, and they understood the nuances of the products we offered. All they needed was leadership, and someone willing to fight for them. Over the next few weeks, I immersed myself in every aspect of the business. I pored over financial reports, scrutinized client contracts, and spent hours speaking with employees one-on-one. Each conversation revealed a new piece of the puzzle, painting a clearer picture of where we stood and what needed to change. Slowly but surely, I began to formulate a plan. One afternoon, while reviewing old project files, I stumbled upon something remarkable, a prototype for a software tool designed to streamline data analysis for small businesses. It had been shelved years ago due to lack of funding, dismissed by James as impractical. But as I examined the code and read through the accompanying notes, I realized it was brilliant. With some updates and refinements, it could fill a gaping hole in the market, one that larger competitors had overlooked. Excited by the discovery, I called an impromptu meeting with the development team. At first, they were hesitant, unsure whether to trust my enthusiasm. But as I explained my vision for reviving the project, their skepticism gave way to cautious optimism. By the end of the discussion, they were nodding eagerly, already throwing out ideas for improvements and enhancements. For the first time since I took over, I saw a spark of passion reignite in their eyes. Revitalizing Lumina Tech Solutions wasn't easy. Every step forward seemed to be met with 2 steps back. Clients continued to leave, suppliers demanded overdue payments, and cash flow remained perilously tight. Nights blurred into days as I juggled meetings, negotiations, and endless problem-solving. There were moments when doubt crept in, whispering cruel reminders of James's taunts. "Let's see how far your grand ideas get you." Yet through it all, I refused to give up. I poured every ounce of energy into turning the company around, determined to prove, to myself as much as to him, that I was capable of more than anyone believed. As word spread about our revamped product line, interest began to trickle in. Small businesses, eager for affordable solutions tailored to their needs, started reaching out. One by one, we secured contracts, each success bolstering our confidence and momentum. Employees who had once resigned themselves to failure now worked with renewed vigor, their pride in the company evident in everything they did. Still, challenges loomed on the horizon. Just as things began to stabilize, a major client pulled out unexpectedly, citing budget cuts. Panic rippled through the office, threatening to undo months of progress. Sitting alone in my office late one night, staring at spreadsheets filled with red ink, I allowed myself a rare moment of vulnerability. Tears streamed down my face as exhaustion and fear overwhelmed me. Was I fighting a losing battle? Had James been right all along? But then I remembered the faces of my team, their determination, their resilience, their unwavering belief in what we were building together. I wiped away my tears, squared my shoulders, and got back to work. Because giving up wasn't an option. Not anymore. Little did I know, the greatest test was yet to come. The greatest test arrived on a Tuesday morning, the kind of day that starts off unremarkable but quickly spirals into chaos. I was in the middle of reviewing quarterly projections when my assistant, Claire, burst into my office without knocking, a rarity for her. Her face was pale, her hands trembling as she clutched a folder. "Maggie," she said breathlessly, "you need to see this." I took the folder from her and flipped it open. My stomach dropped. It was a letter from one of our largest creditors, threatening legal action unless we paid off an outstanding debt within 30 days. The amount listed was staggering, far beyond what we had available in reserves. Worse still, buried in the fine print was a clause stating that failure to comply would trigger default agreements with several other lenders. If that happened, Lumina Tech Solutions would be forced into bankruptcy. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just bad news, it was catastrophic. All the progress we'd made, the late nights, the sacrifices, the fragile hope we'd managed to rebuild, was teetering on the edge of collapse. And worse, I knew exactly who was behind it. James. He must have tipped off the creditors after learning about our recent successes. His smug voice echoed in my mind, "Let's see how far your grand ideas get you." Claire watched me anxiously, waiting for some kind of reaction. But instead of panic or despair, something inside me shifted. Anger surged through my veins, sharp and electric. No, I wouldn't let him win, not like this. Not when so many people were counting on me. "Call an emergency meeting," I said firmly, closing the folder. "Everyone. Now." By the time the team gathered in the conference room, tension hung thick in the air. Word had spread quickly about the creditor's letter, and fear was written plainly on their faces. They looked at me expectantly, searching for answers I wasn't sure I had. "I won't lie to you," I began, standing at the head of the table. "This is bad. Really bad. But I refuse to believe it's the end. We've come too far to give up now." I explained the situation as clearly as I could, laying out the numbers and the looming deadlines. When I finished, silence filled the room. Then, slowly, voices started to rise. "What can we do?" asked Marcus, one of our senior developers. It's not like we can magically come up with that kind of money overnight. We'll figure it out, I replied, my tone steady despite the storm raging inside me. Together. That's what we've always done. One by one, ideas began to flow. Some suggested cutting costs even further, while others proposed reaching out to existing clients for early payments or additional contracts. A few offered to take temporary pay cuts to help ease the financial strain. Their willingness to rally together moved me deeply, but none of these solutions alone would be enough to close the gap. Then Sarah, our marketing lead, spoke up. What if we launched a crowdfunding campaign? She suggested hesitantly. We've built something people believe in. Maybe they'd be willing to invest in us directly. The idea ignited a spark of possibility. Crowdfunding wasn't without risks, especially given the tight timeline, but it offered a way to involve our community and demonstrate the value of what we were creating. With nothing left to lose, we decided to go for it. The next 2 weeks were a blur of activity. Every member of the team threw themselves into the campaign, working tirelessly to craft a compelling narrative around our mission and products. We shared stories of how our software had helped small businesses thrive, highlighting testimonials from satisfied clients. Videos were filmed, graphics designed, and social media posts scheduled down to the minute. On launch day, I stood in front of the team, my heart pounding as we watched the donations roll in. At first, it was slow, a trickle rather than a flood. Doubt crept back in, whispering that maybe we weren't ready, that maybe we'd misjudged the support we thought we had. But then something incredible happened. A local entrepreneur who had benefited from our tools posted about the campaign on his blog, praising our impact and urging his followers to contribute. Within hours, shares and pledges skyrocketed. Messages of encouragement poured in from strangers across the country, each one reigniting our faith in the power of collective effort. By the end of the first week, we were halfway to our goal. But just as momentum seemed unstoppable, disaster struck again. One of our key servers crashed, taking down critical systems and halting production. Clients grew frustrated, and the negative feedback began to pile up online. Our crowdfunding page saw a noticeable dip in contributions as doubt spread among potential backers. Despair threatened to consume me. How much more could we endure? Yet once again, the team refused to falter. IT worked around the clock to restore functionality, while customer service reached out personally to every affected client, offering transparency and assurances. Meanwhile, Sarah spearheaded a PR push to counteract the backlash, emphasizing our commitment to transparency and improvement. Slowly but surely, trust began to rebuild. Donations picked up again, bolstered by renewed confidence in our ability to overcome adversity. As the final days of the campaign ticked away, we found ourselves neck and neck with our target. With only 48 hours left, we were still $50,000 short, a daunting gap that felt insurmountable. Exhaustion weighed heavily on everyone, but there was no time to rest. In a last-ditch effort, I recorded a heartfelt video message explaining everything we'd been through and why saving Lumina mattered so much, not just to us, but to the countless small businesses relying on our tools. I posted it everywhere I could think of, praying it would resonate. And then, something miraculous happened. James appeared. It started with a single tweet, retweeting my video with a snide comment about how desperate I looked. But what followed caught me completely off guard. Dozens of former colleagues, industry peers, and even ex-clients of Lumina responded, calling him out for his cruelty and hypocrisy. They recounted stories of how he'd mishandled projects, alienated partners, and abandoned loyal employees. The tide turned against him, and suddenly, our campaign became less about raising funds and more about proving that kindness and resilience could triumph over arrogance and greed. Donations surged overnight, fueled by outrage and solidarity. By the time the clock ran out, we hadn't just met our goal, we'd exceeded it by nearly $20,000. Victory tasted bittersweet. Yes, we'd saved the company, for now, but the scars of the past few months ran deep. Still, there was no denying the transformation that had taken place. Lumina Tech Solutions wasn't just surviving, it was thriving in ways I never imagined possible. As I sat in my office late one evening, staring at the updated financial reports, I allowed myself a rare moment of reflection. James had tried to destroy me, to prove that I was incapable of succeeding without him. Instead, he'd unwittingly handed me the opportunity of a lifetime, an opportunity to redefine not only the company but also myself. The realization that this might only be the beginning sent a shiver down my spine. For weeks, I had been fighting fires, putting out one crisis after another just to keep Lumina afloat. But now, as the dust settled and the company stabilized, I found myself staring at a blank canvas. The struggles had forged us into something stronger, more resilient. And yet, deep down, I knew that survival wasn't enough. It was time to dream bigger. In the months that followed, Lumina Tech Solutions transformed in ways I could scarcely have imagined when I first walked into that crumbling office building. The crowdfunding campaign had done more than save us financially, it had reignited a sense of purpose within the team. We weren't just building software anymore, we were creating tools that empowered people, giving small businesses the resources they needed to compete in an increasingly digital world. Our revamped data analysis platform became a cornerstone of our success, earning rave reviews from clients and industry experts alike. But what truly set us apart was our culture. James's leadership had been defined by fear and control, but under my guidance, Lumina blossomed into a place where collaboration and innovation thrived. Employees who had once felt disposable now took ownership of their work, pouring their hearts into every project. Weekly brainstorming sessions turned into lively debates about how we could push boundaries further faster. Even Sarah, whose confidence had wavered during the darkest days, emerged as a fearless advocate for creative marketing strategies that put us on the map. As word of our turnaround spread, opportunities began flooding in. Venture capitalists approached us with offers to invest, but I turned them all down. This wasn't about selling out, it was about staying true to the vision we'd fought so hard to protect. Instead, we reinvested profits back into the company, expanding our product line and hiring talented individuals who shared our mission. One day, while scrolling through LinkedIn, I stumbled across a post written by none other than James. He was boasting about his latest venture, a flashy new startup backed by millions in seed funding, but there was something hollow about his words. The comment section told the real story, former employees lambasting him for his toxic management style, clients criticizing unfulfilled promises, and competitors mocking his inability to adapt. Reading it filled me not with triumph, but with sadness. Somewhere along the way, he'd lost sight of what mattered most, not money or accolades but people. It made me reflect on how far I'd come since those early days of uncertainty. When James handed over Lumina, he thought he was giving me nothing more than a sinking ship. What he failed to understand was that sometimes, it takes hitting rock bottom to discover your strength. That company wasn't just a business, it was a reflection of everything I believed in, resilience, integrity, and the power of second chances. A year later, Lumina Tech Solutions hosted its first annual Innovators Summit. Held in a sleek convention center overlooking the city skyline, the event brought together entrepreneurs, developers, and thought leaders from across the globe. Standing on stage as the keynote speaker, I looked out at a sea of faces eager to learn, connect, and grow. It was surreal to think that just 2 years ago, I'd been sitting in a courtroom wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. "Failure isn't the end," I began, my voice steady despite the nerves fluttering in my chest. "It's the beginning of something greater, if you let it be." When I took over Lumina, it wasn't because I wanted to prove anyone wrong. It was because I saw potential where others saw ruin. Potential in our products, in our team, and in ourselves. I paused, letting the words sink in before continuing. We didn't just rebuild a company, we built a community. A community rooted in trust, perseverance, and the belief that no challenge is insurmountable when you face it together. The applause that followed was thunderous, echoing through the hall like a tidal wave. As I stepped off stage, members of the team surrounded me, hugging me tightly and congratulating me on the speech. In that moment, surrounded by the people who had stood by me through every trial, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. This wasn't just my victory, it was ours. That evening, after the summit wrapped up, I found myself alone on the rooftop patio of the convention center. The city lights stretched endlessly before me, twinkling like stars against the night sky. Pulling out my phone, I opened the photo album where I kept pictures from the past year, snapshots of late-night brainstorming sessions, celebratory team dinners, and milestones we'd achieved together. Each image told a story of growth, not just of the company but of me. Scrolling to the last photo, I stopped. It was a candid shot of the entire team taken during the summit, everyone smiling and laughing without a care in the world. They looked happy, whole, and for the first time in years, so did I. As I tucked my phone back into my pocket, I realized something profound. James may have given me a failing company, but in doing so, he inadvertently gave me the chance to redefine my life. Through the struggle, I discovered strengths I never knew I possessed and forged bonds that would last a lifetime. Lumina wasn't just a business, it was proof that even in the face of failure, hope can prevail. And as I gazed out at the glittering horizon, I smiled. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew one thing for certain: I was ready.